Before the oxygen mask sealed her lips forever, before the morphine turned her veins into rivers of velvet silence, before the heart monitor screamed its final, endless monotone, Mary Tyler Moore did something nobody expected from America's eternal sweetheart. She summoned Glenn Corbett to the bedside, grabbed his collar with a claw that once flung a beret into immortality, and spat fire for 47 straight minutes. 47 minutes of pure, unfiltered, 60-year-old venom that scorched the wallpaper, curdled the floor drip, and made the nurses outside the door cross themselves like they'd heard the devil confess. "Write this down, Glenn," she rasped, voice like sandpaper dragged across diamonds. "Every name, every syllable, every drop of blood they owe me. I want the world to gag on it when I'm gone." And then she began. Picture December 29th, 1936. Brooklyn. A third-floor walk-up on East 28th Street that smelled of boiled cabbage, camels, and Catholic guilt thick enough to choke a priest. George Tyler Moore, her father, came home every night with ink on his fingers and disappointment in his eyes. A utility clerk who counted pennies for Con Edison and sins for God. Marjorie, her mother, counted bottles. First gin hidden in the flour tin, then vodka in the teacup saucer, then anything that burned fast enough to blur the sound of her husband's rosary beads clicking like a death watch beetle. Mary was the eldest, the quiet one, the one with legs too long and dreams too loud. At 6, she was already sneaking into the Orpheum Theater on Flatbush Avenue, hiding under seats to watch Fred Astaire float across the screen like gravity was a suggestion. At 8, the family fled west in a rust-eaten Plymouth that coughed across the country like a dying man's last joke. They landed in North Hollywood, a stucco box on Burbank Boulevard where the palm trees mocked their frost-bitten Irish skin, and the neighbors spoke Spanish like a secret code Mary would never crack. At T12, she was lying about her age to dance in the chorus line at MGM, kicking higher than girls twice her size, while the stage manager screamed, "Smile like you mean it, kid." At 14, she was sneaking onto the Universal lot, hiding in the rafters of Soundstage 12 to watch Judy Garland cry real tears for The Wizard of Oz. At 17, she was pregnant, married to Richard Carlton Meeker, a 27-year-old cranberry juice salesman with slicked hair, slicker promises, and a smile that turned to teeth the moment the ring was on her finger. Richie arrived July 3, 1956, 3 weeks after Mary's high school graduation, while she was still wearing saddle shoes and a future too big for her ribcage. She danced through morning sickness as Happy Hotpoint, the diamond-studded elf who pirouetted across refrigerator doors for $300 a week, legs kicking higher than the price of freedom. America fell in love with her gap-toothed grin, her pixie haircut, her eyes that said, "I'm going to make it," even when her husband said, "Know your place." Then 1961 detonated like a nuclear sunrise. Carl Reiner dragged her into a living room set on Stage 19 at Desilu and said, "Be the wife every man wants and every woman wants to be." Laura Petrie. Capri pants smuggled past wardrobe in her purse. Beehive hair that defied gravity and network executives. A woman who cried real tears, laughed real laughs, and outsmarted her husband in front of 20 million people every Tuesday night. Network brass screamed, "Housewives don't wear slacks." Mary wore them anyway and changed television forever. 2 Emmys by 29. Magazine covers stacked like poker chips. Little girls across America suddenly believed Funny and Pretty could share the same body. But backstage was a blood sport that left scars deeper than any script. Rosemarie, 50-something vaudeville vampire in cat-eye glasses and a voice like a foghorn dipped in bourbon, cornered Mary in the makeup room on day 1. "Listen, sweetheart, I was headlining the Copacabana when your mama was still changing your diapers. Don't you forget it." Every time Mary nailed a take, Rose would mutter, "Beginner's luck," loud enough for the boom mic to catch. Every time Mary got a close-up, Rose accidentally stepped on her mark. Every time Mary got a laugh that lasted longer than 3 seconds, Rose would hiss. Enjoy it while it lasts, kid. They all fade. Mary smiled for the cameras, seethed in the parking lot, and went home to a toddler who didn't understand why mommy cried in the shower until the water ran cold. Dick Van Dyke was worse. The man could fall over an ottoman and make God laugh, but off camera, he fell into bottles faster than he fell over furniture. Rehearsals derailed by 10 a.m. because Dick was still drunk from midnight. Mary fed him lines, covered his flubs, laughed twice as loud to mask the dead air when he blanked. He'd stumble into her dressing room at 2 a.m., reeking of scotch and self-pity, begging her to fix his marriage, his career, his life. She'd hold his head while he vomited into her trash can, then go home and vomit herself because the man she worshipped was drowning and she couldn't save him. I carried that genius on my back for 5 years, she told Corbett 60 years later, voice like broken glass dragged across gravel. And he let me. He let me carry him while he pissed away everything I gave him. I hope every sober sunrise tastes like Ashtam. 1966. The show ends. The industry waits for her to vanish like every other sitcom wife. Instead, she marries Grant Tinker the day her divorce is final, launches MTM Enterprises with a kitten logo that roared louder than MGM's lion, and greenlights a show about a single woman who chooses career over wedding cake. September 19, 1970. Mary Richards walks into WJM and the world tilts on its axis. That opening shot, Mary spinning in Dayton's department store, Tam O'Shanter soaring into Minnesota sky, like a middle finger to every man who ever told her to smile quieter. 7 seasons. 29 guest stars who became legends. For Emmys. A newsroom that felt more like family than her own blood. But Ted Knight was a human landmine wrapped in a cheap toupee. One day he'd hug her like a teddy bear. The next he'd scream that the writers were castrating Ted Baxter because Mary got one extra line. He cried if the laugh track was too loud. He cried if craft services ran out of banana cream pie. He cried if the studio audience clapped for her first. He once locked himself in his dressing room for 3 hours because a critic called him one note, forcing Mary to crawl under the door on her knees to coax him out with a pint of Haagen-Dazs and a lie that the critic was just jealous. Mary spent 7 years wiping his mascara while pretending it was teamwork. I should have won an 8th Emmy for emotional labor, she spat in 2016, eyes blazing like she was 29 again and ready to burn the set down. Diabetes arrived like a thief in 1969, blindsiding her at 33 during a Broadway tryout for Breakfast at Tiffany's. She collapsed mid-pirouette, woke up in Cedars-Sinai with a blood sugar of 700 and doctors who said she'd be dead by 50. She looked them in the eye and said, "Watch me." Became international chair of JDRF, raised hundreds of millions, turned her scars into war paint, and lived another 48 years just to spite them. Ordinary People, 1980. Robert Redford begged her to play Beth Jarrett, the wasp glacier who'd rather bleed ice than grieve. Mary gained 20 pounds, chopped her hair into a severe bob, and delivered a performance that peeled skin from audiences' souls. Oscar nomination. Lost to Sissy Spacek. Didn't care. That same month Richie, 24, drunk and drowning in his mother's shadow, put a sawed-off shotgun to his temple and painted the walls with legacy. Mary identified the body alone. She never cried in public again. Third husband, Dr. Robert Levine, 16 years younger, walked into her mother's hospital room in 1982 to adjust in 4 and walked out with Mary's forever. Married November 23, 1983, at the Pierre Hotel with only 12 witnesses and a string quartet playing Somewhere Over the Rainbow. He monitored her insulin like a hawk. She taught him how to laugh at death. 33 years of quiet mornings in Greenwich, splitting bagels and the New York Times, far from the Vipers. But the Vipers never forgot her. In the winter of 2016, oxygen tubes snaking across silk sheets like plastic serpents, morphine dripping like slow poison. Mary summoned Glenn Corbett to the bedside and unleashed 60 years of venom in a voice that could still shatter crystal. Write this down, Glenn. Every syllable. I want them to choke on it when I'm gone. 1. Rosemarie. That woman treated me like I'd mugged her in an alley and stolen her spotlight. Every laugh I earned was a laugh she thought belonged to her. I was 24, pregnant half the time, and she still measured my success and how much it diminished hers. She'd stand in the wings counting my applause like a miser counting coins. I hope hell has a vaudeville hook just for her, and it yanks her into the pit every time she opens her mouth. 2. James Garner, 1967 pilot nobody remembers. He strolled in late, bourbon on his breath, cigar ash on his script, and spent the entire rehearsal flirting with 20-year-old script girls while telling me my ideas were cute. Cute. Like I was a poodle doing tricks. I wanted to shove his Polaroid camera so far up his maverick ass he'd be spitting film for a week. He called me little lady one too many times. I hope every rerun of the Rockford Files comes with a disclaimer. This man was a sexist pig in real life. 3. Ted Knight, 7 years of mascara storms. He cried if the laugh track was too loud. He cried if I wore a brighter blouse. He cried if the studio audience clapped for me first. He once locked himself in his dressing room for 3 hours because a critic called him one note, and I had to crawl under the door on my knees to coax him out with a pint of Häagen-Dazs and a lie. I wiped his ego with my own tears and called it professionalism. I should have drowned him in his own banana cream pie and called it justice. 4. Richard Chamberlain, 1964 TV movie. Pretty boy thought every scene was a shampoo commercial starring himself. I suggested blocking. He laughed, actually laughed, and said, "Honey, the camera loves me from this angle. Stay in your lane." I fantasized about stabbing him with his own Emmy for 30 years. I hope every time someone watches Dr. Kildare they remember he was a narcissistic peacock who treated women like set decoration. 5. Dick Van Dyke, the deepest cut. I worshipped him. Then I watched him stumble through rehearsals still drunk from midnight, eyes bloodshot, forgetting lines we'd blocked 100 times. I covered for him, fed him cues, laughed twice as loud to drown out the silence. 5 seasons carrying a genius who never once said thank you. I hope every sober sunrise tastes like ash to him. I hope every time he trips over that ottoman in reruns, he remembers the woman who kept him upright when he couldn't stand on his own. Corbett begged her to let it go. Mary's last laugh was pure arsenic. Let it go? Darling, I carried their egos so long my spine is curved. Let the truth carry them for a change. Let them choke on it every time someone says my name. January 25th, 2017, for 12 p.m. Greenwich Hospital. The monitors flatlined. The woman who turned the world on with her smile turned it inside out with her dying breath. Obituaries called her a pioneer, a feminist icon, America's sweetheart. Only Glenn Corbett knew the final cut. The sweetheart kept receipts, and every name on that list felt the burn from Brooklyn to Bel Air, from 1961 to eternity. Mary Tyler Moore didn't just make it after all. She made it while dragging 5 anchors disguised as co-stars through hell and high water, across 6 decades of teeth-gritted grace. And when she finally cut the chains, she soared straight into legend, beret spinning like a halo forged in fire, middle finger raised to every soul who ever tried to dim her light. And somewhere, in whatever afterlife vaudeville ghosts haunt, Rosemarie just felt the hook. Ted Knight just ran out of banana cream pie. Richard Chamberlain just lost his close-up. James Garner just got called Little Lady. And Dick Van Dyke? He finally tripped over the truth. See you soon.